Set in a town on the North Wales coast, surrounded by woodlands and hills, stands Gwrych Castle. Until recently, this beautiful castle, steeped in history, was just a shell of its former self. Finally, after years of pillaging and neglect, the Gwrych Castle Preservation Trust is seeing that this castle returns from the ruins. In this episode of Ruins and Recollections, we explore this glorious castle nestled in the hillside of the small seaside town of Abergele. We meet the man who has played a major role in bringing fame and potential fortune to the town of just over 9,000 inhabitants and brought back to life one magical castle.
So there's been a house on this site for nearly 1,000 years, and it was owned by the Lloyds of Gwrych, and they were descended from the royal families of Wales. And the early house was burnt down, they say, around about 1800, 1810, and the heir of the estate wanted to build a memorial to his family, so he built a castle. But before then, the site has been very important in terms of Welsh history. There's a pair of Iron Age hill forts either side of the castle, which date back over 2,000 years. The Romans had silver and lead mines in the hillside. There's a Roman shrine above the castle, which was dedicated to the god Mercury, and he was the patron of messengers and merchants, so it's this important route across the coast. And then into medieval history, there was battles taking place in the park below the castle, and by Cefn Ogof, which is the hill over by Rhydd Oil, Llandolas. Richard II was apparently captured in 1399. So you've got this amazing history.
Dr. Mark Baker has had a lifelong ambition to restore Gwrych Castle. Here he retells the tale of people past and present who have impacted on the castle's unique history.
So it's all about people, really, because it's created by people. It was lived in and by a family. It's been used as a kind of entertainment place it was one of the first country houses in Britain to open to the public in 1948. So it's had millions and millions of visitors over the years coming to pay to visit and go to all the events and so on. But in terms of characters who are really interesting, you've got Lloyd Hesketh Bamford Hesketh, who built the place, and his mother died when he was about 9, and it was her family home, and she died in the 1790s, and he apparently said to his nurse at the time that he wanted to build a monument to her memory and to her ancestors. So he went on a grand tour all across Europe, collected lots of classical things. He went to Greece and Rome and all the places you go if you're a wealthy guy in the early 19th century, and looking at different styles of architecture, and came back to Wales and realised it was the castles that he wanted to replicate. So that's what he did. And it was a labour of love for him that all of the stone was quarried from the site, designed most of the things himself, from the interiors through to the artworks that are in the castle. So he was really fascinating. And then the Countess, his granddaughter, who was on the cusp of women's liberation, that when she was born, she didn't really exist as a legal entity, but by the time she died, women had the vote, she could own the property herself, and she's fascinating because she's quite a a contradictory figure, because she was married, she had 5 children, she was part of the church in Wales, but she supposedly had female lovers, and she was a spiritualist and interested in she was a Welsh speaker, and she became a druid, and it's that juxtaposition between a very formal front that she presented to the world and her private life, which was a lot more interesting. So you got many different themes with different parts of the castle's history, so it resonates with people, which is quite unusual for somewhere like this.
Mayor of Abergele, councillor Alan Hunter defines the newly found fame and the impact on the castle, community and North Wales as a whole.
I think the community are very, very supportive of what goes on in the castle, and the impact is not only just for the community, it's for all our local businesses and our attractions in the whole area. I think the community see it as something that we'd be very, very proud of and support.
But I think in terms of the importance for Abergele, there'd been a house up at Gwrych for nearly 1,000 years, so they were very much part of the community. When Lloyd built the castle, it was always, he only employed builders and craftspeople from the parishes of Llandulus and Abergele, so it was all very local. It's always employed local people. Even in like the 1950s and 60s, it had 250 employees when it was open to the public. So that's something, one day, we'd like to try and get back to, because I think it's important that, it's a bit of a kind of economic driver. And one thing that I'd love to do, growing up here and living here, is to provide opportunities for younger people, because I think you get this like natural brain drain of people going off to like Manchester, Liverpool, London, Cardiff. It'd be quite nice for people to like live locally, where they've born and grown up, but also have good jobs. So that's something that I'm really keen to do.
I think the castle is a massively important building to Abergele. It's over the years, before I came here back in '92, it was one of the biggest tourist attractions on the North Wales coast. Obviously with the decline over the last few years, that's fell by the wayside, but since the Trust have taken over and they've started to redevelop and repair the castle, it's a massive importance to the town, but not only the town, it's to the whole of the North Wales coast. It will bring people in and also help support the town and its businesses.
Riding on the fame of I'm a Celebrity, of a new era of adventure, Dr. Mark Baker and Mayor Alan Hunter have a shared vision of a promising future.
I think the direction it's going in at the moment is probably the right way. It's maintaining the historical aspect of the castle and opening it up more to the public to visit. It's also something that could be developed in the future for perhaps people to be able to stay when the buildings are fully restored. There's so many events that can go on there. We can have carnivals, we could have, there's so many things we can do, and the castle are really going in the right direction.
Long term, we'd like to have the main house restored so that you can go and visit it during the day, but a bit like Portmeirion, that you can go and stay in self-catering apartments. I think it'd be amazing for people to have that experience of staying in the castle.
The castle brings people in, and that's got to be good for the future of Abergele. It's got to be good for the businesses and for tourism in general, and I think what they're doing is absolutely fantastic, and the more that we can promote it, the better.
Lloyd Hesketh, Branford Hesketh may have financially supported the opulent foundations, but faced with the remains of neglect, vandalism and abandonment, enormous challenge and a mere £20+ million to restore Gwrych Castle to its former glory.
He opened it in the 1820s, like visitors as well. So all the money went to local charities, and he kind of wanted people to enjoy the place. But I think the big difference between now and then is, he came from quite a wealthy background and he built it and so on, could afford to maintain it. But as a charity, we've got to raise about £20 million to kind of restore the place and then maintain it. So that's one of the big challenges that we face. And the way that it fell into ruin is really tragic, because it was loved right up until 70s, early 80s by different owners, and then it was sold to an American who had a caretaker and didn't really do much with it. and it was asset stripped. So in a 2-year period, so it was 1995, 1996, the roof was removed, fireplaces, doors, windows, anything of any value, and gypsies and travellers moved in. And then by 1997, it was just in real bad state of disrepair. The police got involved, boards everything up. The council locked it down, and it was all a bit too late. So that's when I set up the Castle Trust, and I was very young. I was about 10, something like that, and it got a lot of kind of interest from people like Prince of Wales and Prime Minister at the time, and it was all really interesting for them to have like some kid in North Wales kind of trying to campaign to save like the local castle. And then 20 years later, kind of the Castle Trust ends up buying it, and it's just a massive challenge, but it's quite interesting. And it's all been kind of like sold off in different bits, and there's lots of confusion about kind of where people can go, where they can't go, and it just needs to go through like that process of disentangling a lot of kind of mismanagement and kind of abuse of the place.
The interest, ambition, and tireless devotion from the age of 12 years old has provided a young man with the endless quest of rediscovering the roots seeped in this glorious woodland, a mass of history, misfortune, years of hard work, a personal commitment. So why has Mark Baker dedicated his life to the restoration of Gwrych Castle?
I think I always like a challenge, and I think there was so many, and there still is, kind of, I don't want to say fake news, but fake stories about the place. Like, I remember as a kid being told that it was built by an industrialist from like Lancashire who had mills, and I read somewhere else that it was built by a Welsh family that lived there for hundreds of years. So it was just kind of a quest for finding out what the truth was, and this was like before like social media like was massive and so on. So it was just interesting to kind of piece together the story about what happened to the place, who built it, who lived there, and everyone seemed to have like a different opinion, and I think with social, I hate social media, but everyone's got an opinion these days, and what we've tried to do is based on kind of the back of as a child researching the place and finding all different kind of stories about it, that we don't kind of engage with like social media debates and so on, and we just try and kind of put the facts out there and the story, and it also kind of drove me to do a degree in history, then a master's, and then a doctorate. It's that thirst for knowledge and trying to find out what's true and what isn't, because with history there's always bias. You've always got someone's kind of opinion in there, and then I think as a kid kind of growing up and seeing it ruined, and kind of I remember seeing like it was like an apocalypse. It was like something out of some kind of like video game. It was like a film set that you had kind of all of these like caravans and dogs running around and piles of rubbish and antique panelling being burnt, and I remember seeing kind of like dead rabbits being hung up, and it was like a scene from a film or a game. And as a kid, I was just being just allowed to like go in, and I didn't really care about a kid wandering around. But it just kind of struck me that somewhere so kind of dominant in the landscape had gone into such a kind of like awful condition, and then I just wanted to kind of do something to kind of save it and trying to bring it back to life. And it originally just started out as, you know, researching the history and getting kind of fact from fiction, and you know, it's still probably, it won't get finished until, you know, many years, but it's that process that I find really fascinating, and, you know, engaging with people and them learning about the history, that what keeps me going. And then being able to like go into rooms which haven't been, you know, had a floor, or, you know, people looking out the windows for like 30-40 years, that's quite exciting to kind of get the view that someone, you know, our ancestors have looked out from. So yeah, so it's kind of like a journey of discovery.